probably have by now a good idea of his versatility and the range of his dynamics. So what do you think? Any questions or comments about the book, about the man, about his suspect friends, present company included?
It's he's a perpetual motion machine of creative words. I mean, he's putting together thoughts, like it's just a torrent. It's a very volcanic, pretty great stuff. And when you have a chance, you or Jake can fill me in on the Jewish question.
The Jewish question. Excuse me, Moshe. What is could you translate that, please? What is it?
No, how does the name Godfrey be Jewish? I never associated Godfrey with being Jewish.
Back to this again.
Yeah. Anyways, Jacob, please, can I call you Jacob or you prefer Jake?
Okay. Jacob's fine.
Yeah, tell me how Godfrey, what's the derivation that is Jewish here?
My grandfather, Phil Godfrey, was a German Jew. He would have been born Phil Gottfried.
Gottfried, that's Gottfried. It.
So Gottfried was the German Jewish name. He came over as a young man, as a baby, really, during World War I, when there was strong anti-German sentiment. So they anglicized the name to Godfrey.
You've explained it more than perfectly. Thank you very much.
There you go. So you've satisfied the rabbi, Jake. First go around. That's not easy.
I'm the son of a rabbi.
You're batting 1,000, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, Gottfried was my first guess too, because I think of Gilbert Gottfried, who is Jewish. Yes. And my question to you, Lou, is out of all the philosophers he could have nicknamed you after, why do you think he chose Hobbes with a Z?
He's a big fan of Thomas Hobbes.
There's a backstory to that, Michael. Well, Moshe knows my affinity for Hobbes, and I've written for Hobbes, actually, the London Higher Education Supplement, the Times, the TLS, the Times Literary Supplement, which is still pretty good newspaper, invited philosophers to write about famous philosophers, and I did the Hobbes piece for them some time ago, because Hobbes is somebody I have a lot of connections with. And the backstory, your father, Jake, did a beautiful rant against these. You remember the rant against these academics who, I had run out of grants and I submitted my thesis. This is all true, but he was a dramatist. Your father was a dramatist. It wasn't that bad. I just ran out of money. After they didn't give me the PhD, I moved to the Gas Bay because it was cheap to live there. In 2 years, we wrote in 2 years, I wrote a thesis, which eventually did pass muster, and also the novel Eloquent Sinking, because I was soaking up all this incredible stuff that was going on, including your dad in and out of the scene, and Ted and Paul Almond, and all of this incredible stuff going on down on the coast. So that was grist for the novelist's mill. But the point is that during the exam, the Viva Voce, and Patrick, you're implicated in this if you're still in the room. I saw you a minute ago. Patrick, you and dear Patrick and I met at University College in 1985. We immediately became friends. We've been friends ever since. And I was staying in Patrick's place at the time on Redan Road when I went in for my Viva Voce. Remember, I'd come in from Israel for the oral exam, and you had put us up kindly enough, and you had laid open the I Ching. And when I came back from the Viva Voce, no one knew what was going to happen. It was a train wreck, but we didn't know that. He could have predicted it, but Patrick predicted it, and he had laid open. I'll never forget. I walked into the guest room, and on the desk was the I Ching. So I got a chance to figure out what that had just meant. Thanks to you.
I take no credit for the I Ching.
Well, but you had you had the proper, you had the Wilhelm, right? You had the proper edition there, and it was very helpful. So in the end, it was wonderful in Gas Bay. It wasn't bad at all, because it turned a corner. It served a wonderful purpose, both ways. But in the exam, the point of the question, the answer is this: that in the actual exam, Michael, the first words out of their mouths were, "What are we going to do with you?" When you walk into a PhD exam, it's an oral examination. When the first words out of the mouths of your examiners are, "What are we going to do with you?" This is not the start you would hope for. Usually they tell you, Okay, we want to sit down, relax. We're going to give you, the thesis is fine, but we want to rake you over a few coals. We want you to make a few revisions, but that's usually smooth sailing. All my colleagues had said, and Patrick, I think you had relatively smooth sailing and well deserved in your case. Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't. And the first words out of his mouth were, "What are we going to do with you?" And it was downhill from there. But at one point, they called me the Thomas Hobbes of the 20th century. And that was an enormous compliment. That was worth the whole thing to be called that. And I've tried to live up to it. And now it's the 21st century. There's more work to do. But the point is, however, that they gave me a chance to write a different thesis. They could have failed it. They could have, but they didn't. They said, "We'll give you a chance," and you had 2 years to hand something in. So the Gaspé was a perfect place to do that. It worked out very well. So everything was fine. But your dad really sort of dramatized that. And being an academic himself, and he didn't have any of that sour taste in his mouth at all, because he painted. He was a poet. He celebrated life constantly. So he wasn't one of these academics or English professors tinged by the sour juices of failure. Unfortunately, a lot of failed writers become English professors, and then they're very nasty to everybody, and conspicuously so, because they're narcissists and they can't get published. So it infuriates them. But Michael was never like that. He didn't have an ambitious bone in his body. That's why he left this masterpiece to us to publish. He didn't. I wish he were here. He deserves to join the celebration. But he wasn't ambitious. He was never consumed by that monster at all. He pretended to be a painter and a writer and a flaneur and loitered around, and everything he took into this marvelous writing machine. He had an amazing mind, and everything became grist for his mill, as you, I hope, have seen.
Was the first dissertation really a quantification of good and evil?
No, nothing like it. But
So
your father was a dramatist. May he rest in peace. He was a great dramatist. Plato was a dramatist. A lot of people who wrote great works were dramatists. That's why they're great, because they took something ordinary and they infused it with extraordinariness that it didn't necessarily possess intrinsically, although Socrates probably was extraordinary and Plato was a dramatist of that. So your dad was a dramatist, and but something interesting happened to the first one. Which is that it's called On Human Conflict. It's now been published, but the publishers also didn't like it. After I'd signed the contract and brought it up to date and submitted the final manuscript around 2018, I got a very tart letter back from the editors who had contracted it, and they said, "We're made very uncomfortable by some of your views." Oh, excuse me. These are woke American academic publishers, and they're telling me they're made uncomfortable by some of my views. So they poked the bear. So I wrote back and I said, "Excuse me. It's not a philosopher's job to make anybody comfortable necessarily. That's not my job." I said, my job is to make you think. If any of you are still capable of it. And therefore, I said, if you want to be your laughing Chris, the punchline, I said, if you really want to be more comfortable, check into a palliative care unit. That's their job. They'll make you comfortable. You and the civilization you're destroying. And then they didn't. It took them a few days to answer that one. So eventually we made a deal. Everything's negotiable. Okay. So we made a deal. They said, we'll tear up the contract right now, or we'll publish it, or we'll send it out to our friends who will make us comfortable with it. In other words, they'll censor it, or we'll move it over from the Lexington label, which is the philosophy label that signed it, over to another imprimatur of the same house. It's a huge publishing house, and they have a leper colony imprimatur where they send the books they don't want to publish, but they contracted. So they put it. I said, I'll go to the leper colony. That's
Hamilton Books.
Hamilton Books. So it's called On Human Conflict, the philosophical foundations of war and peace. It's Moshe, look at you, Johnny on the spot. Okay, thank you so much, Mo. You even have a copy. You even have a hard copy.
Hey, Louis, I paid for it. Cost price.
All right, so you got
still even cost price was not cheap.
I got news for you. I got it below cost. Okay, I don't
below cost. That's right. That's
cost.
A Jackie Mason line. I got this for cost. I got it below cost.
By the way, Michael was so politically incorrect. He encouraged me at every possible stage. So if I have become impossible in any way, I owe it a lot to Michael, okay, and you, because you also poked the bear, Moshe, at times. So here's the cosmic justice. The cosmic justice is that this book, although it was shadow banned in the U.S., they published it on the leper colony imprimatur Hamilton. And then they removed it from all the philosophy lists. They removed it from their philosophy catalog. So this book never appears at any of the conferences, or, when they bring their books, they schlep their books and they sell their books and they hand out the catalog. This book is invisible. It was shadow banned by them because they're uncomfortable. They don't like to be uncomfortable. Poor things. But the cosmic justice is that 2 years later, the book makes the top 10 list of books to read to celebrate the occasion of 75 years of India's political independence. An Indian think tank got hold of this book, and they were blown away by it, and they put it on the top 10 list of books to read to commemorate India's 75 years of independence. So that came out of, that's like serendipity, right? Pure serendipity. The shadow ban in the USA, top 10 list in India. So guess which democracy wants another 75 years of independence? Guess which one? Okay? Looks like India from here. So, but your dad was around for a lot of good stuff, and we have in the house too. Moshe, you and David are both offenders of the faith, all right? Because
I have a diploma. I have a diploma.
That's right. Backlash
from Backlash Books.
Yes, you're an offender. You have a certificate from Backlash Books as an offender.
It's been framed and it's on my wall for 30 years.
There you go. And David, you have a certificate also on your wall, offender of the faith. So does Andrew Irvin at UBC, who was a big supporter of this, and so does Michael Godfrey, the late. Your dad was the original offender of the faith. He's just he's such a I can't say a forthright and a righteous man. You know what they said, Moshe? Am I Jewish enough for you? Do I have to prove it?
Yeah, you're Jewish enough for me. It's okay.
So my Torah portion was Noah. My Torah portion was from the book of Noah, and I'll never forget that line. One of the lines in English is that Noah was righteous in his age.
In his own time.
Was righteous in his age.
That's right.
In his time. So nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. Not even saints, not even prophets. Nobody, especially not prophets in their youth. But nobody's perfect. And Noah was saved because he was, compared to the rest, worth saving. Not because he was perfect.
Exactly. It was a comparison. Yeah.
It was a comparison. And Michael was righteous in his age too. He was righteous in his age. Believe me.
Nice. Well, I think it's something to really be proud of, if I may say. Maybe other people want to make some other comments, but Mazel Tov, bravo, Jacob and Louis. It's quite an accomplishment to bring this thing out, and it's a mitzvah too, if you don't mind my saying so.
Mind. Well, thank you very much, Moshe, for your kind sentiments. I mean, you didn't know him personally, right?
No, I don't think I ever met him, Louis. In those days, I don't.
Paths were close at times in Montreal, especially with the musical crowd, because you knew you played with some of these people that played together that Michael knew.
Sheldon and you, of course.
Yeah, and David also was involved in this up to his neck, even deeper, right? David, you were involved in this right up to your eyeballs. You remember all those days. You remember Dog Brothers, Dog Dance.
I wonder what other people's impressions were of the writing. I'd love to hear from other people saying a word or two.
Sure, go ahead, Chris. Please unmute. Please, Chris, unmute yourself.
Hey there, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the imagination is amazing, right? I mean, that last one that you were reading, when he's talking about the universe being an event, I'm just thinking, like, how can someone even imagine to write in that way? I just felt like a very basic element, like time and chronology, was being messed with in that.
Something very Douglas Adams about that passage.
Yeah. No, it was really interesting. Jake, how you doing? You did, I remember you were telling me Nicaragua, sounds like you did quite a bit of work on getting this to fruition as well.
I'd say the book was 80% complete when I got hold of it. I mean, we didn't really add any new text to it, but there was a lot of stitching things together where there were discontinuities, a little bit of reordering, but it was really more about kind of deciding what my dad wanted to, the flow he wanted, and bringing that into reality. It was something he was editing all the way up to the end. So when you receive a manuscript like that, you have sentences that just come to an end with a couple lines of where he was continuing, and then a disconnected new part where he's looking for a way to join them. So we tried to mend those discontinuities the best and simplest way we could without really adding much, but just kind of editing the ending and beginning sentences to join them together without interrupting the flow. Didn't really want to introduce anything new. The few things that I added in editing that were my own, I cleverly hid and will not take credit for.
There's no ferreting them out, Jake. You're a very good writer, and that copy, flap copy text that you wrote is actually brilliant. So you all, and so is your epilogue, which is part of the novel. But Chris, we had a lot of work to do at every level because Michael was a great mimic, and you see he was weaving together many strands, as you can tell from just the selection. There's not one plot. There's the original rabbinical plot with the golem that's going on back in the 13th, 14th, 15th century, and that continues. Rabbi Melech keep coming back with this golem. Well, Patrick, it was wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
You're absolutely heroic for joining us. And everybody, check out Patrick Curry. Patrick, put your website in the chat room before you go to well-deserved rest tonight. Please put your website so we can check out your books. Patrick is a gifted author, a great Canadian author who's, expat in London all these years. Thank goodness I have someone to go to the pub with when I visit London. But Patrick, it's so wonderful that you joined us. So you guys,
I just want to make one little literary comment, Louis, which is that some of the quality of what I've been hearing reminds me a bit of Bruno Schultz, and it's high praise in my book. It doesn't get any better than him. So yeah, it's great stuff. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, thank you so much. Please put your website in the chat.
Yeah, so I got it. I got it.
He did it already. He did.
You guys, there it is. So you guys all of you do yourselves a favor and check out Patrick's books on enchantment or on ecology or on Tolkien. All the above. Wonderful stuff, Patrick. It's so great to see you.
Thank you very much, Louis. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay.
Say good night.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night. Good night.
Thanks for coming, Patrick.
Well.
Nice to meet you.
You're welcome.
So we had to just work on transliterations because he's mimicking so many voices, the French Canadians and the Jews and the Yiddish accent and the Koreans and the Gaspesians, and there's such a mishmash of dialects going on, and he was a master of all of them. So we had to figure out the transliterations and make them consistent. They weren't always consistent. So it was editing, at a very minute level and at times. But basically, he invented words. There were at least 8 or 10 new words that he added to the language. And then there were also copyright issues. We had to, some of the stuff he quotes and some of the stuff, we had to make sure we weren't violating any copyright going to print. He quoted a Leonard Cohen stanza. You can't do that. They'll pull the book off Amazon. Some of them are very proprietary, and we didn't even know how to get a license. We approached, I think Sony owns the rights now, something ridiculous on a mega level. You can't even get rights to quote a passage anymore. So you just take it out and refer to it, So we had to do due process with the editing at many, many different levels. But it was, and we designed the cover. Like it or not, it was all collaborative right from the beginning to the end, every step of the way. So thank you so much for being part of this. And it now becomes a contribution to Canadian literature, which I hope will be read. And it's up to the readers to decide. In the end, what makes a book great is the readership decides it's a classic. And if it stands the test of time, then it sticks around. That's how these other great authors become great, because people keep reading them. And I hope you will too. Would anyone else like to venture, say hello, say goodbye, tell us what you think?
I was going to ask, was Michael inspired by Hunter S. Thompson and, gonzo journalism at all?
I can say a little bit, yes. He did have some Hunter S. Thompson books on his shelf, particularly Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail of 74, I believe it is, 74 or 78. He was familiar with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The movie came out much later, but he definitely knew who Thompson was. There's a little bit of his style in there, yes, for sure. There's pretty much all the great authors of his era. He took them all in and used what was of use from each one in constructing the story. And there is somewhat of that, like, boots to the ground, like getting right in there with the Hells Angels kind of thing. You get a bit of that vibe in the pawn shop, that he's the fly on the wall who has involved himself maybe a bit too deep for a storyteller at times.
Yes, and also the way he writes women, we haven't discussed that, and we haven't. There are so many entanglements in this novel, so many train wrecks of relationships, which are partly real life, partly not. But we didn't discuss any of this. But he also reminded John Lucas, who gave us an endorsement for the back cover, the oldest friend surviving of his and colleague from Dawson College. John Lucas is at UVic now and in his 90s, but he enjoyed the book and gave us a nice blurb for it. But John Lucas thought of him also with a touch of Isaac Bashevis Singer. And he made a great contribution, which I hope people will appreciate in time. And if you do, please leave a review on Amazon. That's what it's there for. Tell us you liked it. If you liked it, say so. You'll encourage others to read it.
Stu is trying to get your
just a quick, because I do have to run, but I learned something just based on one of the background slides you showed, and I learned why some people are so lucky. And I learned that from Stephen Leacock. And it says, I'm a great believer in luck, and I find that the harder I work, the more I have of it.
Oh,
That's
so glad to see you, Stu. I know
Thank
you're
you.
always running. I'm amazed you
Thanks.
sat still for an hour and a half. Thank you. And get a Leacock book. Get it. His books are so witty and wise.
Yeah,
You would
I
really
see.
enjoy.
I see some of the quotes. Are
He will
fantastic.
crack you up. He was a genius. He's a forgotten genius. He was read in Hungary. He was translated in Hungarian, not because he was a professor of economics, because he was a great humorist. Really,
he was
truly.
an incredible humorist.
Thank
One
you.
of our-
Thank
Be well,
you, Stu.
everybody.
We'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Maestro, we should thank Caesar, because the maestro has been handling the lighting, and you've done a perfect job. What are your thoughts? Share with us.
I'm curious how Michael passed away and how old was he?
He was 79 years old. He passed away very shortly before his 80th birthday. He had told me at least a decade prior that he didn't want to be 80, so his timing was impeccable. He did it while I was visiting him in BC. Further great timing. It was congestive heart failure, which he was kept very comfortable at the end. He didn't suffer. I was with him the whole way through. My sister, who was a nurse, was there too. And yeah, this was in 2018, March 19th, 2018.
Did he have
in BC, Jackie?
In
Caesar,
Kelowna,
what's
yes.
your question?
Did he have a prolonged illness?
Yes and no. He had prolonged conditions. He struggled with diabetes and unspecified heart problems for a while that took his energy. But from the point where he went into hospital until he passed away was actually quite short and very untraumatic, actually. And he kept control right to the end and was lucid right to the end and faced it with utter bravery. Yeah, that was my father.
Yeah, and you rescued him. There's no time for this story another time, but you rescued him from Costa Rica. He had decamped. Eventually, he left Montreal, and he was 70 or whatever he was, in the late 60s. He moved to Costa Rica. That's my last time with him. Our last day was in the Orosi Valley. And when he moved to Costa Rica, he started living like Gauguin. He started painting, and he was painting. He lived in this very seedy port of Limon, where he was immediately mixed up with the smugglers, and he fell in with these people, and he's painting the prostitutes, like unbelievable.
He started a second book there.
Yeah.
It was a murder mystery.
Eventually it got too dangerous, so he moved into this very beautiful sheltered Orosi Valley, a few hours on the other side of San Juan, and an unbelievable valley, a tranquil place, and he attracted women there. Your father, women loved him. There was something about the poet. There was this aura around him, and everybody loved him, but women were very attracted to him. And when I visited him in 2011, there was a woman there trying to get him to propose, and she was making lunch and taking us on tours. You remember her, right?
Oh, there were a couple of them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there were always a couple of them when your father was concerned. But
when I visited him in 2006, he was living with the Rastafari. He was living on a compound called Irie with really hardcore Rastafari, and they loved him because they are essentially Jews. They see themselves as one of the tribes of Israel. And they welcomed my father in, and he was one of them. I mean, he didn't grow the dreadlocks, wasn't able to, but if he was able to,
he would have looked good in dreadlocks.
I think he would have. Yeah.
Yeah. So he had a great life. I think he had a great life, and you and your sister did a wonderful thing, a real mitzvah to bring him back from Costa Rica when his health started to fail seriously. But he was full of life every day that I knew him, from 1970 until the last email in 2018. He sent me an email, Jake, in 8 February of 2017, just weeks before he passed away. I got the last email from him, and it said something like, "I'm not sure I like it here." He was in the hospice at this point, and he said he never complained. He said, "I'm not sure I like it here," so he wasn't sure he liked it here. I never knew him not to like it anywhere. He always liked wherever he was.
He told me why he didn't like it. He said, "They gossip about death." And then he repeated it. He paused and repeated it. "They gossip about death."
Well, he has a great philosophy on that too, and that's part of the golem. That's all part of the golem. It's all in dog dance days. Death joins the dog dance as well. So, what do you think? We should call it a night. We've done everything, and we've done the reading.
We should wrap it up. Yep.
We've had the commentary. If anybody else wants to chime in, now's your opportunity.
Yeah, let me just say
Julian,
a quick word.
I hope Julian, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just want to say hi to Jacob. I mean, it's been a long time.
Hi, Julian.
You've changed a lot, but you're still recognizable to me at least. So I guess that's how it goes. But yeah, obviously I knew Michael for a long time since I was young. The proof is in the pictures. But I wasn't really familiar with his literary work at all in those days because, I wasn't really reading much stuff like that. But it's super fascinating just to hear these excerpts, and I look forward to reading the book myself. But I always knew he had a way with words just from listening to his stories. He was one of those guys who was really fun to hang around because he was just so interesting to listen to him talk about stuff. So I remember that, from being a kid, that it was always fun to be around him and hear what he had to say. So I guess I always knew he was a brilliant writer, even though I hadn't really had direct access to anything that he wrote. So I definitely look forward to reading this and getting familiar with his work. And good to see you again, Jacob, too.
Yeah, good to see you too. We had good times that summer. I remember watching Clint Eastwood movies. We watched almost all of them, didn't we?
Yeah.
We were playing the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly theme song nonstop.
Yeah, good times for sure.
Yeah.
Well, great. So on that note, I think we'll wish everyone a pleasant evening. And
there was actually one other writer that I feel was left out of the list of his predecessors, who might actually be one of the most influential writers when it comes to this book, and that's Saul Bellow.
Oh, sure.
Herzog was one of my father's favorite books, and I read it at his recommendation, and I see a lot of similarities between the character of Herzog and the character of Simon in Dog Dance Days. That's actually a book I would recommend anyone to read.
Well, Jake, I heartily concur with you. That list, that quick list up there on the PowerPoint was only Canadian. You know, it was restricted to Canadian authors. I didn't want to cross the border, but if you were going to cross the border into the USA, then Saul Bellow would immediately spring to mind. You're absolutely right. And if you went to the UK, James Joyce would spring to mind as well. You know, he was like a Jewish James Joyce in some ways. And if you want to look at how he writes women, you will start to see Henry Miller and William Burroughs and Charles Bukowski and Henri de Montherlant in there, right? There's all kinds of great American authors and French who wrote women. And also your dad had absorbed all of this and had related to women that he could portray in a not dissimilar way as well. So his relationship portrayals are really unbelievable. Whether they end up in train wrecks or not, they're quite incredible. Listen, guys, I think we're going to sign off, but I want to thank Jake again for all this hard work for 4 years. It's brought to light a wonderful book, and I hope you'll enjoy it. I want
to thank Lou for spearheading this whole attempt. The book probably never would have got published without you, or if it did, it would have been a long time in the future from now. So.
Bravo,
me and my dad, thank you for everything you've done. You've put in an awful lot of work. I know.
Well, your dad and I never kept score, okay? But he, you know, we were like brothers. So this was the least I could do in his memory, and I couldn't have done it alone. This was a team effort, totally from beginning to end, and that's how it remains on the cover. So good work. I look forward to our next collaboration with All and Sundry. Okay, life goes on. Oobla dee, oobla da. Let's move to the next project. But thank you so much for being part of this launch. It's really great.
Au revoir, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Great to see you, old friends. Great to meet new ones. Okay, take care.